for people who might not know, what is RecOps and why has it become such a big deal?
RecOps is a relatively new field. Recruiting has fundamentally changed in terms of what its scope is, what it looks to do, and how it needs to be done in order to be very much considered part of a business critical function.
There's a segment that I love and lots of other people love it. It's called Plead the Fifth.
I lead with empathy and I lead with trying to understand more than I lead with an accusation. Now, I know people who have taken my content, thrown it into ChatGPT, then put it out as their content, but arguably.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Workfluencer podcast. Here's how most people think about building a community, right? Find your niche, create some content, hope people show up. But there's a big difference between finding a niche and actually building one from scratch. And Jeremy Lyons didn't stumble across the RecOps community. He helped create it. He launched the first RecOps conference, turned recruiting operations into a headline across newsletters and podcasts, and built the spaces where the RecOps community now connects, shares, and grows. And today I'm so excited. We're digging into what it really takes to go from participant to leader and how to build something without losing the trust that got you there. Jeremy, welcome to Workfluencer.
Well, thank you for having me. You also said RecOps more than 3 times in the intro. And so per the usual, I get summoned like Beetlejuice. So that's very, very happy to be here. And thank you so much for this opportunity.
That was part of the plan. I'm like, I can't get to 10 times like you, but maybe I can say it a few times. So for people who might not know, what is RecOps and why has it become such a big deal?
Yeah, so RecOps is a relatively new field. It's short for recruiting operations. We go by hiring operations. Sometimes we go by talent operations. And effectively, it really caught on in the last 10 to 15 years because recruiting has fundamentally changed in terms of what its scope is, what it looks to do, and how it needs to be done in order to be very much considered part of a business critical function. So generally when we're talking about recruiting operations, we're talking about 4 main pillars. And everybody who knows me knows I've talked about these ad nauseum. But just to recap, we have our operations pillar, which is generally how most people think of us showing up. It's sort of, we help companies, we help people create better processes, better workflows. We're thinking of the candidates. We're thinking of the interviewers. It's where we do our change management. Oftentimes, this is where if a recruiting coordination team rolls up into anybody, this is where it's going to roll up. We have our data analytics pillar because we happen to be closest to the tools. We have a programmatic pillar because if you have the tools and you have the operational need, you need to teach people how to do the things. So you need to build the things that are then being tracked back. And then finally, we have a strategic pillar. But when you also think about it, I usually say there's this floating 5th pillar, depending on who you talk to, and that's employer brand. Because per the usual within recruiting, we're not really given a whole lot of resources and we're kind of low on the priority list. So when we go and we need marketing tools or we need anything like that, we have to build it ourselves. And so we also oftentimes learn how to do employer brand as well.
Yes. And I'm team 5 pillars because anywhere I've done RecOps, I've also brought the employer branding piece to it. Like you said, okay, we've got this amazing process. Now we've got to market this thing. Hey, have you subscribed? Let's fix that. It's the easiest way to support this show. So not that long ago, RecOps didn't really have a spotlight. It was mostly behind the scenes or part of someone else's job, something that happened quietly inside TA teams. But now we've got newsletters, podcasts, entire conferences focused on RecOps. How has the community responded to this surge in attention?
Yeah, well, and it's been really interesting because as you point out, there were a lot of people who did bits and pieces. And so then it becomes, how do you carve out this space for this role when everybody sort of says, yeah, but I do that. And I think one of the things that's really unique about our space and the people who are in it is we're people who like to problem solve at scale. And I think that's the thing that separates us from the people who sort of do one little thing. They might do one little thing well. So I don't want to say to anybody, no, you can't be doing that. But I think that the fact that we've carved out this space shows why we're needed and why we're necessary. And I think one of the things that was very hard about maybe 10 years ago when it was still really fresh was people didn't know how to market towards us. People didn't know how to talk to us. And I think that people have been talking to recruiters for so long. One of the things that is very key to a recruiter's success is at the individual role level, the relationships that they're building. What's key to a recruiting operations person's success is, can you take the micro and turn it into the macro and make it repeatable and have data behind it? And so when you do everything, it's very hard for people to know where do you sit. And so one of the things that I saw was you'd get like one talk at a recruiting conference, and it'd be like very high level, very much not the tactical people in the weeds. And that was something that I brought. Certainly, I was probably not the first. I will claim I'm not the first to do anything. None of this is totally brand new and unique. But I was one of these individuals who basically said, we can't go to a recruiting conference and just have one stage and one speaker and one thing. We can't do that anymore if you're trying to bring up a generation of folks that are going to have to know how to do things at a technical level in order to be successful. So it's been really interesting watching the space spread and doing what I can to help spread it. I think a lot of times one thing that people talk to me about is they say, well, Jeremy, you almost never get up and deliver your own. You don't do keynotes. You don't do single speeches. Why don't you do that? And I think that for me, one of the things that's really, really important is showing that there is a wide range of voices, giving the stage to people who might be, used to working behind the scenes, because that's what RecOps people do. You kind of have to pull us out. And I think that giving that opportunity for other people to express what they're doing and showing their creativity is really, really important. So if I got up on stage every single time and just fought for my own spot, that would not be doing the community a service. That would be doing a community a disservice. And I think that it's important for people to see how other people are doing things that are very creative.
That's amazing. And I mean, anyone that I've ever spoke to that does community building, this is really the approach, and it's about platforming everyone else's voice. Sometimes to a point where they forget that they're also an important voice. When did you realize, okay, I'm not just part of RecOps, I'm like actually building this community?
Well, and to, I think your point, I think that there are certain communities that do a much better job of not feeding the ego of the people who build it. I think that there's the business of community and then there's the community business. And I think that when you talk to people who very much care about their communities, it's sort of, you've created a stage for yourself and everybody else props you up. Whereas if you talk to the other, it's sort of I need to be seen as the leader and the one in charge of this community, and I am this community's voice. And I think for me, one of the things that was very, very, very intentional from the beginning was I didn't go into this thinking I'm trying to make myself something bigger. I went into this thinking, how do I help my community? And I think throughout my career, throughout my life, I've never had a difficulty being the first one in. I sort of know that for the most part, nothing is going to kill me. Now, I'm not running into the breach first, but I think that I'm certainly someone who I've taken my hits. I've learned through mistakes. I always jokingly say that my autobiography will be called Lessons Written in Blood. But I think what's really been important to me has been the community and keeping the community front and center. So that, I think that comes through when people talk to me. And I think that has been one of the things that has certainly allowed a lot of people to feel very comfortable with putting me front and center, as sort of saying like, hey, here's the voice of our space and of our group. Um, and I think that that's been something that's been really sort of interesting, because now a lot of people will say, oh, well, you are Mr. RecOps. And I'm like, please don't say that. I don't think that for myself. I'm just a voice trying to create space for other voices to come out and create a space that deserves the respect that it hasn't had for years and years and years.
Yeah, but you're never going to escape that. Like anytime I talk to anyone, anytime you think about RecOps, anyone asks me like, "Oh, do you know a RecOps?" Yeah, I don't know, but like Jeremy Lyons, it's like that's the name. You're Mr. RecOps. So there's this moment when like this thing that you're doing as a side project suddenly becomes the thing everyone's looking to. Like, what was that moment for you?
I think that moment for me was, so when I started the RecOps Roundup, which is how a lot of people know me, I started it at the time when there were a lot of layoffs happening because of the market shift in 2022. And one of the things that was very, very key to me when I started it was that I wanted to be very, very intentional about the recruiting operations content, because a lot of people had classified things as recruiting operations that wasn't. Or if it was so thin to get to like make that thing there that it was a stretch. And that bothered me because I was spending a ton of time trying to read and improve my skills. And per the usual for RecOps people, we're some of the first people that a company lays off.
Yeah.
Because we're not seen in the same light as the way that a recruiter is. But arguably, we allow the recruiters to recruit. And so if you're going to cut your team, in a lot of ways, it almost makes sense to keep your RecOps person because of the efficiency gains that they're trying to create, for that. And even sometimes when teams get smaller, it can actually it reduces the internal bureaucracy around what we can do. But I think what really started to click for me was I started including open RecOps jobs. So it wasn't just sort of a, hey, this is a RecOps job. And you're like, what? No, it's not. I started including RecOps jobs. I wanted again to create a space so that other individuals could put their names out there if they were looking. So I've been very intentional about that. I wanted to give people the opportunity to write, create different voices, and I've been able to do that. And I think the weirder, cooler thing where it sort of clicked was I've had a number of people say, I found my next job because I saw the job in your newsletter. And that to me was just sort of this like weird moment of kind of going, okay, I know I put in a lot of work every week to do this, and I don't see it as work I do for me. I see it as work I do for my community. And people starting to say like, I've got it maybe 20 times. People were like, this is where I found my next job. And that's to me something where I just go, that's the impact. That's what it's doing. And that was where I started giving myself, a little bit of a pat on the back to go, the hardest part of your job every week and finding new jobs is really paying off for other people. And that's the karma that I hope that I can be able to redeem at some point someday.
That's amazing. Does it does it put any type of pressure on you?
I put that pressure on myself because, like I had said before, I don't do the newsletter for me anymore. I think I started out doing it because I wanted the space to have a place to gather and a place to find good information specific to our space. And I very quickly realized that like if I was doing it for me, it wasn't the right reason. And so once I changed my mindset and made it about the community, that's when it became very, very important to every week have something for someone there. And even when I go on trips and stuff like that, there's still a part of me that goes, I'm letting my community down by not publishing something this week. And that can be a really hard sort of guilt trip to give yourself, but you have to give yourself the space. You have to give yourself the time. Sometimes you need to step away from it for a week to just feel a little bit more like yourself and rediscover your passion in it. And I've never lost my passion in doing it.
And I'm sure the community understands. It's like you're human. You can take a week off. As you've built the RecOps community and all the properties that you have, like the newsletter and all of that, how did you navigate like staying neutral while also working with brands and vendors?
Yeah. So this was something that I was very conscientious of the minute I started putting in product news. And the reason for that being is that I knew the minute I started putting in product news, products would come to me and say, hey, we want to feature ourselves in your newsletter. What is that going to cost us? And part of me sort of said, well, okay, cool. Now I could monetize this. But another part of me said, the minute you start taking money from somebody else, you have to start taking their opinions. And I wanted to be able for us, whenever I was doing the newsletter, if even in the future, to be able to be critical. I say critical, not like bashing, but to be critical in the right kinds of ways. And if you're taking money, then there might be this sort of feeling of like obligation to show them in the best light and to push them in the best light. And so one of the benefits has been it's been neutral. I've never taken any money from any brand to feature them or do anything like that. Any brand that wants to write an article for my newsletter is welcome to do so. And I have a very strict editorial process that we follow because it's not meant to show, hey, we're the latest and greatest. I want neutrality. But I'll also throw this out there for anybody else who's thinking about a newsletter or building a community and wants to remain neutral. When you maintain neutrality, it can also make it difficult for brands to want to work with you because they don't, even though they understand your position and even though you explain your position to them, there's this feeling that can sometimes be like, well, where do you stand? Like,
Yeah.
Do you stand for us? Do you stand against us? Do you like, if we go into a partnership with you, like, what are we doing? And I'm very clear with any partnership agreements and stuff that I have. That's like, I reserve the right to be openly critical, but I'm always going to be critical to you first. I'm not going to go and air out dirty laundry. And anything that I do say publicly that is going to be critical is not going to be something that you haven't heard because I would have told you or you would have known, or this is not feedback that's specific to me. It's feedback that you can use that is actionable. And so I think that maintenance of neutrality is not difficult individually, but it can be difficult if you start taking the money. And so I've always been very, very intentional that that's not what the newsletter is for or why I do it. I don't judge other people for having sponsorships on their newsletters. Power to them.
Do you mind sharing how you monetize, or do you monetize at all?
So I don't monetize my community and I don't monetize my newsletter because I have one of the benefits of neutrality is that I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different groups who are trying to cater towards the recruiting operation crowd. And so I've been able in a lot of ways to create a space for each one of those places to build up their own community around RecOps principles. And that has been really, really tremendous in there. But do I make money from it? Well, the thing about it that I tell people is I have RecOps Collective, which is my consultancy. One of the things that I do, one of the reasons that the newsletter came about and the community work came about was when I was starting RecOps Collective, I had a twofold mission. One was the business side, one was the community side. And my whole idea was I'm going to use the business side to create the funding for the community side. Now I had very advantageous goals that at some point in time, maybe I could set up like a community fund to help RecOps people who are looking for work or who are out of work that would, serve as a thing. I always wanted to have like a guild. That to me struck me as something that could be really, really cool. But I've used the business revenue to help do the community side. And thankfully, there are a lot of tools out there that keep my costs really, really low. And so I'm able to do the things that I need to do on a pretty cool shoestring budget. And that's been how I've, helped to funnel some of that stuff towards the social groups.
I love that. I love that. And I love talking to creators and like the different ways that they go about monetizing because everyone's different. There's some people who take direct money from brands for like sponsorships. There are people who do it like you. I just love all the opportunities and all the different ways that being a creator can pay off.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing about it too, that's opened up doors is that because these brands know that I care about the community and do the community work, a lot of them will invite me to help them with their conferences. So I just helped Greenhouse do Greenhouses Open for Ops. That was a lot of work. Gem, that was a lot of work. Even putting together the conference that I helped put together, I brought it as a community, not as individuals. And I think that, certainly the brands have, paid me for my expertise, but that is a totally different sort of way of everything. And I will say this, the newsletter being what it is, having the following that it is, the GPT that I built being what it is, having the following that it is, and then the expertise that I have in this space that I've worked on for over 9 years, that has opened the doors for these partnerships and to be involved in events. Even Ashby One, I helped, write some color content and funny content for that. So there are ways to find yourself involved with tools and vendors in your space that come about because they care. They know you care.
Yeah, for sure. Quick break. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but don't know where to begin, I've got something for you. I'm letting women in TA, HR, or employer brand take over the Workfluencer podcast for one episode.
I am so excited to be able to do a podcast takeover. And I'm joining Rhona Pierce today as a guest host. Rhona is the creator of the Workfluencer podcast.
You get a behind-the-scenes look at how I plan and produce everything. I handle all the editing, and you walk away with a fully edited episode, social clips, and the audio to launch your own pod if you want. If that sounds like your kind of test drive, head over to workfluencerpodcast.com to apply. So one of the things that you're known for, I know, is your used to be called hot, but now spicy. So you moved away from calling them hot takes, and now you call them spicy takes. What's the story there?
Yeah, so the story there was, this is probably about early 2023, and everybody was talking. For those that don't know, there was kind of this shift on LinkedIn. It's now kind of shifted back a little bit, but there was a lot of outrage and there was a lot of anger in that time period for about a year. And rightfully so. The market was what it was, and people were expressing themselves in very different ways. And one of the things that I sort of noticed was everybody was calling things a hot take. And sometimes it wasn't all that hot. And people were just sort of saying like, oh, well, it's a hot take because like I'm setting up this opinion. And then to me, I was like, well, but that's kind of mild. Is that really a hot take? And one of the things that has always been very key to me in most of my content and the things that I produce is I want to teach people something. I'm a former teacher. Education has always been a really, really important thing to me. And so one of the things that I did was I was like, all right, what can I do that is differentiated and interesting? And I realized that Spice has the Scoville chart. And so I could if people had an interest in what the spice was, then they knew it became a grading system for how I would release a take. And sometimes it was as, mild as like bell peppers, which aren't very spicy. And sometimes I got really, really, really spicy. But I'll give a shout out to Liz Schwartz. Liz, at one point in time, I did one take. I asked her thoughts. She said to me, well, that was really actually quite mild. It was like mayo. So I was like, all right, well, but the idea was try and teach people about the Scoville chart try to teach people about how certain spicy things work, give my takes something a little different that, you sort of knew if I was going to say this is bell pepper, it's not going to be all that aggressive. If I'm going out and saying it's Scorpion X or something that you've never heard of, that's where I'm starting to get like a little bit, more aggressive with the take. And that just stuck. And I think a lot of people ended up picking up spicy as opposed to hot because spicy has a different connotation to it than just hot.
Yes, it totally does. And I saw somewhere, or did I hear? I don't know if I saw or if I heard that you've like taking this like literally to where you were doing like this spicy or like eating spicy things or something like that with with a few of your friends.
Yeah, so I can't wait to see when it drops. Brandon Jeffs and I decided, let's have a little bit of fun with this and let's do some spiciness with different founders. Okay. And Steve Bartel at Gem was kind enough to be our first sacrifice, and played along great with it. Thought it would be good to do. It's a riff on hot ones, but we called it spicy ones, and it's a good way to have some fun. I think people need some whimsy in their life, and I can't wait to see Brandon release that because it was. There's some heat in there.
I can't wait. And yeah, now that you say it's like, yeah, I think I saw or Brandon said something that he was going to do something about like that. So, I can't wait to see that. Yeah. So, what's your advice for someone who wants to start creating content, but isn't sure like where to begin?
I think you just start. You find something that you're interested in and just press on that button time and time again. I think that there's a lot of folks out there and like, your Brian Finks, your Steve Levy's, there's a lot of folks out there where it's just consistency. You need to, Katrina Collier, another great one out there. Monica Evie as well. You can do content on just about anything, and everything. And if you have a unique enough voice, you can deliver it in a number of different ways. Some people it's, hey, look, I love to edit and I'm going to do everything as a podcast. And there we go. To other people, you're better writing, it's committing yourself to that 5 to 10 minutes every day of just doing it. And for eventually it no longer becomes this thing that takes a lot of work to do. You can pump it out very, very quickly. One of the things that I still do, could I go to, with the GPTs that I built, with all the AI out there, could I just go and be like, hey, I want to write an article about this and this and this and this, pump something out for me in my voice? And that's the other thing too, is like, now I have enough content out there that the internet could easily be like, I want to know Jeremy A. Lyons' tone and style and all of that, and could very easily mimic it. But to me, I still write a lot of that content without it. I mean, I use Grammarly, but Grammarly is not exactly like writing something for me. And I do it because it's a really good meditative exercise for me at this point. And that's how I sort of sometimes process my own thoughts, is by sitting down and writing week over week, post over post to everything. And then I think the other thing too is, I think people think that when you start doing content, you have to do massive amounts of content. You have to have a content calendar. You have to have all these different things that you're hearing about the successful content creators do. And I think really the simplest thing is, if you're going to write a long form article, is what you said, could that be short form? And if it's short form, could it be a post? And if it could be a post, could it be a one sentence? And you start your work back and you start to realize like, okay, no, what I'm trying to say couldn't be expressed in one sentence. So now I'm going to need more space. Okay, it needs even more space than this. It needs more space than that. And I think one of the things that I found about writing is that I tend to be very verbose. And so one of the things that it has helped me to do as well is become much more succinct and much more, I'll say, pedantic sometimes, because being able to have that has now actually also made me better at writing in other things. So emails, prompts, stuff like that. And I think that the advice that I would give to people is just like, start small. Start it with a notes app on your thing. Just like somebody says something and you're just like, I have something to say and I don't want to put it out publicly, do that. Or have a friend group. I have a number of different chats with different folks in our space where it's like, this is my opinion on blank. And they're like, that's good. Don't publish that. And I think that it's always good to have somebody there who's a filter for you, somebody who's there who you can bounce ideas off of. And then you can find your community within whatever you're writing about, whatever you're building, because it'll start to resonate with newer people who maybe you've never seen it before, new introduction. There's a lot of times I don't repeat my content. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it over. Now, granted, people will say, but Jeremy, but you talked about the pillars thing. Aren't you repeating content there? We've kind of heard that shtick before. And I will say this, there is a moment when you've been doing content for a really long time where it sort of feels like you're the musician or the comedian where they're like, get up there and play the song, or like, tell the joke, tell the lucky joke again. It was funny. Why are you not funny this time? And you're like, because I want to do new material. And so I think that, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different places, a lot of directions that you can go whenever you're doing it. And you're the one who can create that universe for yourself to do that content.
Yeah, that's really the beauty of it. But you actually, like you said, you have to start. If you don't start, then it's never going to happen. You're just going to sit there and think about it. Look, like I've always said, and I was talking to, I think it was Andrew Lewis in a previous episode, and we're like, you know what? Does everyone really have this content calendar and all of these pillars and all of that? It's like, usually the people pushing that are the people that are selling some sort of service around that. As I talk to more and more creators, and like you said, everyone has a creator group chat, or a like colleague group chat. Most people don't have this huge structure. Like I would love to have like 2 weeks planned of content, right? I would love it. I have all the tools to do it. I would love to have it. It's not the reality. You just have to start somehow. What I do is like the podcast. Yes, I have 6 weeks out of podcast episodes. That's the most I can do. Now, what happens, what those posts turns into, how it gets edited, I don't know, but I record 6 weeks ahead. Yeah. So like you can just start small. Like if you're going to start a podcast, start recording the episodes with a few friends. If you're going to start writing, like you said, start writing in the notes app. Just start.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point too, I mean, one of the reasons why I even know what the mentioning of a content calendar is because I was very lucky that my long form content resonated so well with the community, because that afforded me the opportunity to have a conversation around community work with Ashby back in the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And so my role as the expert in residence, I was within the marketing team. And so I had the opportunity to really learn from some very, very good marketers who are willing to sit down with me and sort of say, okay, this is what this looks like. And this is what this is the professional side of the marketing pieces. So I learned that. I mean, I'll never look at a URL the same way ever again, which is fine because now I know what a UTM is and I know like, okay, this is why you want to change UTMs and things like that. Like learned a ton, and I love the people that I learned from there and have great relationships with the people that are there. And that has helped me in other elements of business and how to think about marketing and think about my content. But to your point, like I have a podcast that I'm working on with a friend of mine, Ben Aber, called The Quiet Out Loud. And, we're recording those episodes, and it just took us like, did we start off with this like really complex document? Yeah, we did, because we wanted to be able to focus ourselves, and we're very operationally minded. But what does our content calendar look like? hey, that person looks really interesting to talk to. Let's reach out to them and see when they're available, and we'll record an episode, and then we'll get into like the trying to figure out how to edit, how to do this thing or that thing. And so it just comes down. It's like, you got to put your fear behind you and just try it. And you know what? You can try it, figure out you don't like it, and no one is going to hold it against you.
Exactly.
You know, try the simple things for free and see if you have stuff. Substack is free. Riverside has free accounts. Record a couple of episodes, see how much time it takes you to edit, see how much time it takes you to do something or another. And you know what? If you find after the end of all that, you're like, this sucks and I hate it. Like, no one's going to sit there and be like, you've agreed to this, you've signed your soul over, and now you must do the dance, monkey. Do the dance for me.
Forever.
Yes, forever. You know, no one's telling you that. And that's, I think, something that can be also very overwhelming is, all right, so then what happens when you stop doing this? Like, will the world keep spinning? And the answer is 100%.
100%. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. And if you've watched the show before, you know there's a segment that I love and lots of other people love it. It's called Plead the Fifth. I ask 3 questions. You can answer them all, or you can plead the fifth, but you can only plead the fifth to one. And you're not going to know what question comes next. The funny thing is, I have a spreadsheet with all of my questions where I categorize them by spice level, mild, spicy, and super. Well,
I like it.
I knew I was talking to Jeremy. So all of these are like extra hot spicy. So are you ready?
Only if I can be, when I say the fifth, I can use Dave Chappelle's fifth. Bentley will understand if he listens to this episode. We went on a whole tear
on that. All right, let's get started. So name a creator that you secretly think bought their way to success.
That is such an interesting question. All right, so when you say bought their way to success, tell me a little bit more there.
I don't know. They bought followers. Whatever that means to you.
Oh, man.
It could be that they just paid for ads.
You know, it's so funny because it's just like, if there are those people, I don't know them. So it's like, I can't even plead the fifth. I mean, there are certain folks that I've looked at their content and I've certainly like had like kind of like cocked an eye at sometimes, but then I've like had conversations with them and kind of like understand the angle that they took. So like Chris Mannion is one of those where I was like, I don't know your angle, but I don't want to make any like assumptions about what you're doing. So I just reached out and said, hey, can I have a conversation? And learned more there. Brian Blair is another one. But I lead with like empathy, and I lead with like trying to understand more than I lead with an accusation. Now I know people who have taken my content, thrown it into ChatGPT, then put it out as their content. But I don't think that I would get on that soapbox to say like you bought your way to anything other than to say like maybe
you cheated your way.
Yeah, there was maybe a little bit of ethics there that I don't necessarily agree with.
Are we going to name names of those people?
I don't need to name names, but those people who have done it will certainly know who they are when they look at themselves in the mirror. But I will say this. One of those people, because they did that, forced me actually. So, talking about the newsletter, that the newsletter started as a response to them copying my long form, because what I realized is that in order to counteract that, I needed to, if I switched up my short form, they were going to need to do much more work to get a long form article out of my short form content. And it was going to be very, very obvious to anybody who was reading that that's what they were doing. And so the newsletter in many parts, I can thank them for that, for pushing that to start, because I very quickly figured out what was going on and figured out my response to what they were doing.
Love that. Love that. So, second question, name a company that you would never work with again and why? Like a brand.
You know, I haven't worked with that many brands to be able to call anybody out. I think that there are certainly been posts that people have asked me to interact with, and I've basically said to them, no, like, not going to happen. I think that what you're asking me to do is wildly inappropriate, and I'm not going to do it. But I don't think that there is anybody that I've worked with out there. Actually, you know what? There is one brand that I would never work with again. Not going to name names there.
All right. We're taking this as you pled the fifth because you didn't name a name.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's see.
I'll
question.
take the fifth on that.
Last question. If your audience saw your unedited drafts or DMs, like what would surprise them the most?
Oh, I think that they would be incredibly surprised at like how raw some of them are. I think the other thing that people would be very surprised about is, look, I know some really great HR people. I also have very, very strong opinions on HR. And I do separate HR from TA.
Yes.
And I think that to the outside world, TA is part of HR. To the people team that we are effectively like stepchildren. We're step siblings. We got thrust together. And I think something that would surprise people is just how forward I can be about my feeling about that relationship that TA and HR have. And yeah.
Yes. I dream of a world where everyone understands that we are not the same.
I mean, I sort of say, yeah, I mean, yes, there's that. I think if I'm getting even more critical, I think all HR folks should do a tour at Waffle House in order to validate some of the things that HR people sometimes say. I think it would be very different.
That would be interesting. I would love that. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. You survived Plead the Fifth. What's next for you? Like any new conferences, collaborations, or anything that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm really looking forward to the podcast that I'm releasing with Ben Bear. That's going to hopefully happen in July. We're just editing up some episodes. We're going to do a full season drop. So Quiet Out Loud is something that I'm really looking forward to. Conferences this year, I'm playing it a little bit by ear. There are some fun things that might be happening in my personal life, and so I want to leave the schedule a little bit open there. But if people want to collaborate, people want to talk about things, I'm always available. People should hit me up on LinkedIn. I do respond to everything, or they can message me through RecOps Collective.
Amazing. And I'll drop all of those links in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on the Workfluencer pod today.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you're enjoying the Workfluencer pod, share it with someone who's changing how we talk about work, or who should be. And hey, if this episode gave you ideas or inspiration, leave us a 5-star review. Reviews help other listeners find us, and honestly, it makes my day. Workfluencer is produced by Perceptible Studios. Learn more about how we can help you use video to attract, engage, and retain qualified talent at perceptiblestudios.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you next week.